Hi, I'm Sijbrandij. I'm the CEO and co-founder at GitLab, and this is an AMA and Ask Me Anything for the team in Asia Pacific. First question is from Rohan. Rohan, thanks for that question. But they couldn't be on the call, so Hila, or can you maybe verbalize the question?
Yeah. So the question is, how can we contribute to the upcoming GitLab certification programs over building its contents, or is it just limited to the PSE team?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, our mission at GitLab is everyone can contribute. So if you can't contribute, something is wrong, and I'd like to know about that. But the first person to ask is probably the team that is making the certification program. So I don't know is the answer, and you should ask them. Next question is from Matt. Matt, if you're trying to speak, we can't hear you. And not in the participant list. Hila, would you be so kind?
Yeah. So do you feel team members can make unfair assumptions about you because you are a CEO, developer?
Yeah. I don't think they make any unfair assumptions, but the one I struggle with the most is that I make a suggestion and they think it's an order that they have to execute on. So that's the biggest problem. So at GitLab, we work with DRIs. So if you're in charge of something, you are responsible for what you do. You get to decide that. Everyone gets to make suggestions, people in the company, people outside the company. But in the end, if you have to do the work, you get to decide. So that's the biggest problem. Sometimes people take my suggestions a bit too serious. Tiago, do you want to verbalize your question?
Oh, great. Apologies in advance if you seek of answering this, no pun intended. With COVID in some countries going on to a second wave and another lockdown, what have you seen out there in your meetings, and what's the general feeling in the market?
Yeah, of course, we're living in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, so very relevant question, and I'd be happy to answer it. I'm surprised it's only recently that California, where I live, went back into like a more severe lockdown, although it's not as severe as it was in the beginning, as far as I know. I haven't seen the market reaction to that yet. We have seen a big recovery. So in the beginning of the pandemic, we saw really ASPs, average sales prices, getting really reduced. So we were still doing deals, except they got much smaller. And we've seen that pick back up as people said, hey, we got a collaboration software that enables remote work, transforming to becoming a software company is more essential than ever. So we got to invest in those tools, and we got to consolidate the tools so we're not working in 15 different ones. So it's easier to work together. So I think the pandemic has accelerated a lot of trends that are tailwinds for us. It's a good question about the effects of the second wave. So far, my assumption is that we know better how to handle, like we know mask wearing is a big benefit. So I think we will be able to avoid the extent of lockdown that we had in the first wave. And I hope the business will reflect that. Phil?
Hi, Sid. You mentioned in your investor update recently, FY21 strategic initiatives enhance our best-in-class create and verify stages, broaden enterprise readiness, and advance secure stage maturity. I was curious, how do you see the rest of the organization supporting these initiatives, assuming we're not directly working on them?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think the way to support them is use the product and complain and keep complaining if things aren't right. And you can fix them yourself, that's great. But if you can't, raise an issue. For example, like top thing, like best in class create and verify. Every single merge request that you make now, the first thing it will show you is you cannot merge this. Even though like a few seconds later, it will say, oh, sorry, I was wrong. You can merge this. It's a very kind of jarring experience. It's been in the product for a few point releases. And like merge request is like the most essential feature in GitLab. There's basically a big usability issue staring everyone at the face. And I think that should have been prioritized earlier. And I think it will take some, Michael, your mic is open. I think it will take, I think we should encourage kind of being more picky. Look, this is a super essential feature in GitLab. This has to be polished. This has to be good. And when it isn't, we're going to speak up and we're not going to back down. And we should treat this more as a bug than as a feature to be added. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Thanks for asking. Andrew?
Yeah, I just want to ask a quick history about our values and how do we came up with it to begin with. I'm just saying that when I applied to GitLab initially, this value page is like what really captured me. And these days it feels like it's like a lighthouse, you know. So just wondering, how do we came up with it to begin with? Thanks.
Yeah, I'd happily answer. What do you mean with a lighthouse?
No, as in like, it's like a guiding principles, right? We have all these things, very hard decisions to be made and all that, and we're not gonna always get everything right, but at least we have some guiding principles. So it's like a lighthouse in this ocean kind of feel to it.
For sure. Yeah, thanks for that. The value started with just writing down things we already cared about. So articulating things we were already doing. And at a certain point, we had 13 values, and most people could remember about 3 of them. And I didn't get further than half of them without looking them up. So it wasn't working. And my coach, John Hamm, said, hey, this is not working. You should consolidate. And then we try to kind of write them out, add some, and try to cluster them and try to figure out how to cluster them. And then we also map them against the 5 dysfunctions that you can have in a company. That paragraph is still on the values page. And we consolidated it to the 6 we have today. And then told my wife, like, hey, I have these values and I'm trying to come up with an acronym. I have some acronym. She's like, that's weird. You can also spell credit with that. And I'm like, darn, why didn't I think of that? So that's how they came about. But it's kind of capturing what was already going on in the beginning. And one thing I'm really proud of is I think our values are more top of mind today than they were in those early days. And I think that's the benefit of kind of writing them down and having 15 processes to reinforce them. We got better at living our values instead of with many co-located companies that rely on kind of verbally transmitting the values or diffusing the values. It tends to get diluted a lot over time. And hopefully that doesn't happen to us.
Personally, what I find it really helpful as well with the value page is the details on each, like the points. because when I look into most companies' values, they have like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, but it was just like a short line, and you can sort of interpret it in like multiple different ways. And we actually spell, oh, this is what we mean by, collaboration and iteration and things like that. So it's just really awesome. Thanks. I just don't think this is like documented anywhere. I'm just kind of curious. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Feel free to document, and thanks, Dylan, for adding some context in the agenda. Marcel.
Hey, Sid, we had some questions kind of about predictions for the future, but I was more wondering about things that you've learned over the last few months of the COVID epidemic. So what are some of the lessons learned from the COVID-19 situation from your personal life as well as for GitLab?
Yeah, you put personal life first, so let's start there. I think there's, first of all, the realization how much of your life is already online. You can, like, the biggest problem has been not being able to get a haircut. Like, that's pretty crazy, like how much is already available via delivery. I was pretty amazed at realizing that. And you find out that your wife is actually pretty good in cutting your hair. So grateful for that as well. Second thing is I caught myself just not going out for weeks at a time. And it's kind of, I don't know, it doesn't feel right. So I started taking a bit more walks, started working more. And you kind of like you cancel vacations because you can't fly to the place you wanted anyway. And that really wasn't a smart thing to do. I think a month ago, I took my first vacation since COVID. It was like overdue. I've taken another one since. I've taken 2 weeks off in the last month. That was a lot better. So I think we've seen in the productivity stats that people are working more, which is kind of not intuitive because a lot of people had their kids at home, and we see some of those people actually having reduced efficiency, as is very reasonable and understandable. But even people with kids and a lot of people without kids at home had a lot higher efficiency because they were just bored. So they started working, or at least I assume that's the reason. So it's important to take time off. That's why we did a couple of friends and family days on Fridays, just treating that as a vacation day. And I hope people feel empowered to take vacation time. And even if you don't go anywhere, it can still be vacation if you don't have to do what you normally have to do. You don't have to bother with that. Second part of the question was for GitLab. Yeah, a few things. We saw, I think we communicated reasonably well, like, hey, this is happening. This is what we're doing about it. We responded reasonably well. So I'm proud of how people took that. I'm proud of how the whole company kind of responded. And I was surprised, like the economy seemed to slow down very rapidly and we've responded to that. But after that, it started to go faster for software companies again. And I think now a lot of software companies are kind of have higher valuations and their stock is trading higher than before COVID. So it's kind of, COVID seemed to have accelerated the trend towards digital and internet and cloud native. And I didn't expect that to that extent. And of course, the biggest news is like every company found out that they can totally work remote. I thought that working remote took a lot of effort and skill and that like you had to be very disciplined like us. I think what I learned is that, yes, we are doing it really right. That's why we have great efficiency in many parts of our business. But even if you don't do it super planned, you're still going to be more effective remote. And that was kind of cool to see how easy it is these days to do remote. and to see that the hardest part about working remote is being intentional about working all remote and about the informal communication facilitating that. So we get still a lot of work to do before we convince all companies to do that. That was a long answer. Did that address your question, Marcel?
Yeah, that was great. That I had the same kind of surprise that so many people were like, yeah, oh no, I'm going to have to work from home and I don't know how I'm going to deal with it, and asking me for advice because I work at GitLab. And then like 2 weeks later, it's like, oh, this makes total sense. And I'm never going to go back into the office again. And it's totally logical. Why wasn't it obvious? And people just picked it up super fast. Yeah. Thanks a lot. That was great.
Awesome. I see that there's a question that we can't live stream, so I'll stop the recording and then answer that question. But before that, Samer has a question.
Yeah, hi, Sid, thank you. I mean, acquiring the two fuzz testing component, I believe that was a great move and definitely a great addition to our offering in GitLab in the security area. Are we planning to do more of that to cover and strengthen more of our security features?
Yeah, we're actively looking to acquire companies, especially in the areas where we can make a ton of progress. We're open to more security acquisitions. In fact, we look closely at a company and decided not to purchase recently. There's nothing in the pipeline, and even if there was, I wouldn't tell you because this is public. But I think we're already insecure. We're getting pretty good. We recently won against Veracode based on kind of the results of our scans. We recently won against Checkmarks based on the quality of our scans. So our quality is very rapidly increasing. So we've got a great team working on that, and we're making very rapid progress. So acquisitions are certainly not needed to have a best-in-class offering. But as always, like we're open to it. And those two acquisitions, kudos to the people that joined our team. They've been making very rapid progress, and both of them are ahead of the roadmap we set, the goals we set. So that's really encouraging to see.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll stop the live stream here.